What if I told you that instead of treating the root cause of your tennis elbow, what you've been doing is just treating the symptoms, and that's why it keeps on coming back? So we used to think that it was all about inflammation and that inflammation was bad and evil and the root cause of tennis elbow. That's where you get all these recommendations and the RICE protocol, meaning RICE, rest, ice, compress, elevate. Elevate doesn't really make sense for the arm. You wouldn't elevate it. That's more for lower extremity injuries for the legs. But this protocol came out a very long time ago, and it was designed and based on reducing inflammation, on managing injuries that way by resting, icing, compressing it, and elevating it. And I'm sure you and many of others have tried to implement these strategies into treating their tennis elbow, and what they notice is that sure, it helps in the moment. You have some short-term decrease in pain because it feels better, but as soon as you try to use that elbow more, as soon as you get back to playing the sport that you love, the pain slowly comes back to the same spot where it used to be, and you're just stuck in this vicious cycle. So does treating inflammation really fix the root cause? That's what we'll talk about in this video. And at the end of this video, you'll finally have clarity on where to go next with your tennis elbow to finally fix it. My name is Dr. Adrian, and I help people just like you overcome elbow pain and get back to the sport and their everyday life pain-free. And at this point, we've worked with over 250 people, and most of the people that we spoke to had this belief that inflammation was causing. And at this point, we've worked with and helped over 250 people overcome their elbow pain and get back to the sport that they love pain-free. And something that we see commonly is most of them believe that the root cause of their pain was inflammation. And that's why they were trying things like ice, resting, stretching it, cortisone shots, anti-inflammatories to help to reduce the inflammation. And yes, most of them experienced significant reductions in the symptoms, but it was short-lived. In the long term, it always came back, and it was a very frustrating cycle that they were stuck in. So tennis elbow is pain on the outside of the elbow. And in this area is where the tendons insert into the elbow. And in most cases, tennis elbow is an injury to the tendons on the outside here. Now, for a very long time, and still to this day, commonly we call that tendinitis. Or in this case, with tennis elbow, we call it lateral epicondylitis. Lateral because it's on the outside. Epicondyle means the bone that sticks out. And itis, actually that ending itis, both in tendinitis and lateral epicondylitis, means inflammation. So that's the common belief, and the belief that we used to have with this injury is that it was caused by inflammation, and that inflammation was the root cause of it. But with more research coming out, what we're actually finding is that inflammation, yes, we do get inflammation with tennis elbow, but is that the root cause? Is that the driving force? And do we see a lot of inflammation with chronic issues? And what they found with these research studies is that that's not the case, that inflammation is not the primary driver of the pain and the dysfunction long term. And we only usually see a lot of inflammation in the beginning when the injury first happens and during flare-ups, but not long term when it becomes a chronic issue, when it's been going on for more than 2 or 3 months. So if it's going on for more than 2 or 3 months and there's not a lot of inflammation, then why do we still get pain? Why do we still have dysfunction? So we slowly went away from calling it tendinitis, and we started to change the terminology to tendinosis. Now, osis, that ending, means degeneration without the presence of inflammation. So we're getting closer to what actually tennis elbow is. But there's also been some studies showing that people can have tennis elbow with no degeneration. So if they have pain on the outside and they don't have degeneration, then it wouldn't be tendinosis as well. So actually the best word to describe tennis elbow or that injury to that tendon is tendinopathy, which means just general dysfunction and pain in that tendon without any assumption of inflammation or degeneration, because we don't need inflammation or degeneration to have pain in that elbow. Let me explain a little bit about what I mean with degeneration. So with the tendon, its role is to absorb the forces going through the arm. So imagine a rope, and if we keep on tugging on that rope over time, it slowly starts to weaken, maybe it starts to fray, and that weakness, that degeneration, that breakdown is what's contributing more to that injury. Now, we don't always need degeneration to happen to get pain, but it is something that we see very often. And for those people that do get pain without any degeneration, it's just the tissue is sensitized, it's irritated, and that's what's causing the pain and the dysfunction, not necessarily any structural changes in the tendon itself. So going back to that degeneration, as that tissue is being overloaded, as it's being broken down, that then triggers the inflammatory response. And the inflammatory response is a natural body response when we have damage or we need to repair tissue. So for example, when you go to the gym and you work out really hard and you're not used to it, you'll be very sore. And yes, there's inflammation involved in that process, but is inflammation the root cause? No, it was the exercising, it was the breakdown of that tissue that then triggered the inflammation. So instead of treating the root cause, what a lot of people have been doing is treating the symptoms. So you can think of it as in your car, if you have the check engine light on, it's like smashing the check engine light or putting a band-aid or a tape over it so you don't see it, instead of actually going in and fixing the engine. So that's the biggest mistake that I see, is people rely and they try to fix the check engine light instead of fixing the engine so they can get it fixed long term and not just mask the symptoms. So to understand how to break through, we first need to understand why this happens in the first place. So I like to break it down in simple terms and show you with the graph like this. So on the left side here we have stress, and on the right side we have the capacity of that elbow. What I mean by stress is all the daily activities, working out, doing our sport, wear and tear, that adds stress onto the elbow. And capacity, what I mean by capacity is how much can that elbow handle, how much can it tolerate, because there's a limit for everybody. Even for a healthy elbow, if we overdo it, we will get some soreness, pain, dysfunction if we overdo it. So every elbow has a certain capacity, and if we go over that capacity, then we'll start feeling those symptoms. So what happens in the beginning, in the degeneration stages, is that stress is too high. And especially what happens with elbow issues is it's too high for a very long time. So these are more wear and tear injuries rather than an acute injury where it's just one sudden motion and boom, you have an injury. What happens most of the time is over time, we stress that elbow, we stress that tendon, and slowly it starts to degenerate. And what happens when it starts to degenerate, when it's overloaded, we slowly start losing that capacity. So we lose that capacity, and this is where a lot of people get stuck, because as soon as that capacity decreases, now your window of opportunity is less. It's more irritated, so now your everyday life activities start to trigger that pain and dysfunction. And instead of focusing on rebuilding the capacity, what most people focus on is actually reducing the stress, the inflammation, the pain in the moment. So this is where they take anti-inflammatories, they use ice, they rest it, they stretch it, they massage it, just to help and manage the injury. But as soon as they start trying to get back to their sport or everyday life, the pain just comes back. It's because we haven't addressed the root cause, that capacity, and what we're doing is just we're focusing on reducing the stress, the inflammation, the pain in the moment. And that's where we get stuck in this vicious cycle with our tennis elbow. So when we're focused on just reducing the stress, I call this the managing stage, where you're just managing the injury. As this continues, the next stage from there, I like to call the stuck phase, where you have this limit, you have this ceiling where you can maybe go about your regular daily life without pain, but as soon as you get back to playing golf, tennis, pickleball, any of these sports, the pain just shoots back up. So that's why I call the stuck phase. So how do we break through? How do we fix this? It's not by focusing on the stress, it's by actually switching that focus to the capacity. So the big question here is, how do we rebuild that tendon? How do we get it strong enough to build that capacity, to get it fixed? And by rebuilding that capacity, by strengthening that elbow and getting this green bar back up here, now we can get back to doing our sport, everything that we love, pain-free, because now the stress is less than the capacity, meaning that we're not overwhelming the elbow. So this is the secret to long-term fixing the elbow issue instead of just managing it. So how do we actually fix that capacity and get back to playing pain-free? It's not done by resting, icing, stretching. It's not done by the ice protocol. All of that will just keep you stuck because, again, it's not inflammation that's the root cause. It's degeneration, weakness, overload to that tissue. So what we need to do is build that foundation, and we do this by exercises. Exercises designed to stabilize that pain, to build that foundation, to slowly start rebuilding that tendon, and slowly, as that tendon gets stronger and stronger and stronger, we rebuild that capacity, we open that window of opportunity, and we're able to do more throughout our life until we get to a point where finally we're back to doing everything that we want pain-free. Now, I know this sounds like we just want to strengthen the elbow as fast as possible and that increasing the weights will make it better, faster, stronger. That's not necessarily the case. We do want to increase the weights over time as we progress and get the elbow stronger and more resilient, but we can't rush this process. With tendons, it takes a little bit more time compared to muscles for them to regrow, get stronger, and increase their capacity. So what I like to say in the beginning is think about it as conditioning. You're conditioning that tendon, you're making it more tolerable, more resilient, and that is the secret in the beginning. Later on, you can focus on strengthening. And if you want some more help with that, I have a longer guide, almost 3 hours, on tennis elbow itself that goes more into detail on how to actually fix it, the exercises, the assessments, the programming, how to increase the weights over time. So if you want to watch that, wait towards the end of this video or find it in the description below. But in this video, we covered that inflammation is not the root cause of tennis elbow, and that by focusing on decreasing inflammation, we get stuck in this pattern where we can't break through, we can't fix it long term. We learned that the root cause is actually overload, degeneration of that tendon, and weakening of that tendon where it can't handle our normal activities. And we learned what to focus on next to break through instead of being stuck in that cycle.